Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Within Black Ops 6 right now, there's actually a lot of things you might accidentally be doing that are actually hurting your gameplay, hindering your overall experience, or limiting the potential you could have from match to match. And today, I want to focus on what those mistakes are and how you can actually correct them to basically just optimize your overall Black Ops 6 experience. So as we dive into all the details and everything here today, if you enjoy the video, if you find it helpful, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. Much love to everyone who takes the time to do so. And if you're new to the channel, every single day I got you covered with absolutely everything going on in Call of Duty. So if you want to make sure you are always in the know, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications. We are on the road to 1 million subscribers, and it would be awesome if we could hit that before the end of the year. So first up here, I do want to talk about a few things you could be messing up with your class setups and your loadouts here within Black Ops 6. For the most part this year, loadouts are relatively streamlined. Because we don't have too many attachments that actually have cons, it means you can build a weapon very straightforward and very simply and not really have to worry about anything, as opposed to years past where it's like, hey, if I'm putting on barrels for range and velocity, now I got to worry about how slow my weapon's going to feel. Or if I'm going all in on movement, I got to worry about the control now. That's just not the case this year. However, as you are building on a weapon and you've got a certain setup on there, maybe you have an underbarrel focusing on vertical control, you have a barrel focusing on range and velocity, you may be looking at the advanced stats and you're comparing different attachments, and you realize that, hey, wait a second, this says it's going to be minus 30% to my control if I switch from this underbarrel to that underbarrel or something like that. And a big emphasis point that I want to make here is that essentially the confusion with this is that no, that specific underbarrel that says it's got minus 30% might not actually be hurting a weapon like that. Instead, it's comparing it to the stats applied once you have a certain attachment equipped, if that makes any sense. So if you're using the vertical underbarrel that's helping out with control and you go and try and change it to the ranger underbarrel or something else, you're going to notice that if that attachment you're switching to offers less control, or it has a slower ADS or whatever, it's going to basically change the stats and change those percentages based on the entire change that's happening. It's taking away the stats and then it's basically marking the difference of what one attachment does versus the other. So I've seen some confusion. Hey, what's going on when I try and change to this barrel? It says it's doing drastically more to my cons, even though they're not listed there. It's just simply comparing what's already applied versus the new stats that would be there if you do replace an attachment. So definitely don't be confused by any major cons that might be there that aren't showing up in the actual list, just because it's a comparison rather than a fresh look at how the weapon would behave if you just simply were applying that attachment outright directly and not replacing. And while we're on the topic of attachments here, there are a few though that I would definitely recommend avoiding in the vast majority of cases, even though their pros might sound very enticing. The two ones I'm focusing on here are the headshot based barrels that actually increase your headshot damage. However, they do end up having a pretty severe impact on your control, which in my opinion is just not going to be ideal in the vast majority of situations, unless you are specifically maybe grinding core gameplay for your headshot challenges, which I don't think would even be that efficient. It's much better to do just in hardcore outright. That's a barrel that it sounds really cool. Hey, I'm going to get more headshot damage, but you might actually be hurting your loadout in the long term with the cons applied there. And then also rapid fire. This was an attachment that was spammed during the beta and it made weapons super powerful. And yeah, in theory, it's awesome. It actually could help with the TTK of weapons by speeding up that fire rate, and in theory, you could kill enemies quicker. But again, the cons here are incredibly harsh, hurting your velocity, hurting the control in some cases. I mean, hey, if you can't actually land shots on a target, you're not going to have a fast TTK to begin with. So yes, while the pros there are enticing and in one-off situations they could be beneficial, definitely don't be drawn in by the fact that in theory they sound like they're incredibly powerful or even overpowered attachments in some cases, when in reality they're one of the few ones with actual cons, and the cons are certainly noticeable there for sure. Shifting away from some attachments and some setup stuff though, there are a lot of different mistakes you could be making with your settings here. Some pretty important ones. First and foremost, when it comes to your minimap, I stress this every year, like when we go through my settings video and whatnot, do not use around minimaps. Square minimaps are the way to go. And you might think this is just a super straightforward thing. You know, what does it matter if I have a square or a round minimap? Surely that's not actually impacting anything. Well, you actually see a lot more on your mini map when it's square versus round. Round shows you a smaller radius of the map, whereas square expands it a little bit more, and that just means you're getting more information. When red dots are showing up as enemies are shooting unsuppressed weapons, you're seeing more there. When you are, calling in a UAV and red dots are showing up on the other side of the map, you're able to see further out and know the routes that you have to take to get to that action, or the routes you have to avoid, or whatever the case is, right? So with the rounds minimap, you could actually be missing out on some pretty vital information. So absolutely switch that to square in your interface settings. Another big complaint I see a lot of players making is, hey, my game doesn't look that good. How can I make it look better? Even if I'm on console, you're obviously limited a bit more there in terms of customization, whereas on PC, you could adjust your NVIDIA settings or add in saturation and stuff like that, right? Well, just outright in the in-game settings, there's a color filter setting in the interface that actually allows you to make the game pop a little bit more. With the color filter 2, it basically increases the vibrancy and the saturation, so colors pop a lot more. I find it a lot easier to spot players, and players stand out better in certain situations by turning this filter on. And this is universally available whether you're on console or PC. So if you are a little bit more limited in how much you can customize your colors or enhance those, that's a super quick thing you can do in game, and there's really no reason not to do it because you can adjust the levels of how saturated it is. Just outright making things pop a little bit more is going to be better for your overall gameplay here. Another thing I see it's affecting a lot of players is your settings are actually getting reset whenever you restart the game or restart your computer. I've gotten so many comments saying, hey, why is it that every time I boot up the game, all my graphics are changed, all my inputs are changed? Well, there's actually a new setting in the account settings tab called clouded settings. And apparently when you have this turned on, that's actually causing your settings to be reset at times. Now, it's not going to happen for everyone. I had mine turned on for some time, and when I was rebooting, I was okay. And then I turned it off, and I also noticed that my settings weren't changing then either. So it seems like based on community testing, the safest thing to do is to turn off those clouded settings. That way you don't run the risk of it ever potentially resetting you unless you're always going into your settings when you boot up the game and double checking everything, which would become obnoxious and tedious very quickly, right? So that's something as of right now I would recommend turning off. And then another mistake I think a lot of players could be making without even realizing it is ignoring shadows in this game, especially when it comes to just straight up having the shadows setting on PC. You can adjust the quality of these. In the past, maybe that's something you turn off or you don't even pay attention to. You turn it super low because you don't think it's that important. For whatever reason, in Black Ops 6, shadows are so telling. They are exposing players so much. Shadows will appear before an enemy turns around a corner because of the lighting on certain maps. They are incredibly easy to actually use to your advantage. When you see a shadow approaching a surface that you're pre-aiming at or that you're looking at, you know a player is going to push, and that gives you an insane I guess position advantage. Usually in COD we talk about peeker's advantage, where if you're quickly going around corners, you can have that advantage on players who are stagnant and standing still. It's kind of flipped here because shadows are so exposing. So make sure you have your settings turned on for the shadows so they are easily visible and distinguishable in game when there's action going on. And then also you might want to focus more on actually paying attention and looking for them in your gameplay. If you're on console and you don't even have the setting for it, just focus more on actually looking for them because you'll get a lot of easier kills by paying attention to something simple like that. And then the last thing I want to bring up here is just a general PSA for prestiging and using your permanent unlock tokens. We've talked about this a couple times in the past, but generally this year it is much better to not use your permanent unlock tokens on weapons. And the reason for that is that if you have a blueprint for a weapon, so when we start to see more and more store bundles drop, or as we get bonus blueprints from playing the campaign or the vault edition or whatever, right? Those bonus blueprints all permanently unlock a weapon when you prestige. So if you have a blueprint eventually for the AS Val unlocked at 55 will be unlocked for you at level 1 without even using a permanent unlock token. So there's just no real reason, unless you really desperately want one gun right now when you're prestiging. Sure, you could use it then, it's not the end of the world, but from an efficiency standpoint, using your permanent unlock tokens on other things like wild cards or perks and stuff like that, it'll be more beneficial because you're gonna have a means to an end to get extra quote-unquote permanent unlock tokens via blueprints as we see more of those introduced. So definitely a big heads up there. You don't want to be wasting your limited permanent unlock tokens for sure. But all that being said, those are a handful of mistakes you can certainly avoid now when you put that intent into your gameplay and really focus on those things and definitely optimize and enhance your experience in game. Hopefully this video helped you out. If it did, or if you simply enjoyed it, a like would be really appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, you always want to make sure you are in the know for everything going on in COD. Feel free to hit that subscribe button on your way out. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.